The little black girl reached the biker near the hunter's shack as someone watched her from a ridge above. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get into today's story. In the remote, wooded hills of West Virginia, an eerie silence settled as the sun dipped below the horizon. The evening air, thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, was interrupted by the sound of hurried footsteps crunching on the dry leaves. A small figure emerged from the forest, stumbling as she ran toward the distant lights of a nearby biker camp. Her face was streaked with dirt and tears, and her clothes were tattered, a clear sign of the struggle she had just endured. The girl, no older than 10, barely had time to catch her breath before she reached the closest biker. He was sitting by a campfire, the light of the flames dancing on his leather vest that read Thunder Wolves. His name was Jack, a man whose past was as dark as the nights he spent riding through the endless roads of America. He had seen violence, betrayal, and loss, but nothing had prepared him for what he was about to face. The girl grabbed his jacket, her hands trembling as she looked up at him. "Please," she whispered urgently. "They took my brother. You have to help me." Jack, taken aback by her desperation, could feel his heart tighten. His first instinct was to help, to protect. But there was something about her eyes, something that reminded him of a promise he made long ago. He bent down, his gruff voice softening as he spoke. "Who took him? And where?" The girl pointed shakily toward the ridge above them, where a shadowy figure stood watching. Jack's instincts kicked in, the hairs on the back of his neck rising. He had been on enough rides to know when something was wrong. And this felt all wrong. He stood up, his boots thudding on the ground as he turned. To his brothers in the club, they had gathered around the fire, all of them now fully aware that this was no ordinary night. The girl's plea had ignited something in them, something deeper than the need to ride. It was the call of family, of loyalty. "We need to move," Jack said firmly, his voice carrying authority. "This little girl is in danger, and we're going to make sure she's safe." With that, the Thunder Wolves revved their engines, the sound of roaring bikes breaking the stillness of the night. As the group of bikers sped off toward the ridge, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something darker was at play here. The girl had led them into a trap. The figure on the ridge wasn't just watching, it was waiting. Jack's grip tightened on his throttle, and he pushed his bike harder, his eyes scanning the horizon. The girl's brother wasn't the only one at risk. They all were. And with every mile they covered, the danger grew. What Jack didn't know was that the shadowy figure on the ridge wasn't just watching them. He was planning his next move. "I have to warn you, this night isn't over yet." The roar of the engines filled the air, echoing through the dense forest as the group of bikers sped down the narrow road. The girl, still trembling, clung tightly to Jack, the wind whipping through her hair as they rode. Jack's mind raced. His grip on the handlebars was firm, but his thoughts were elsewhere. He couldn't shake the image of the man on the ridge. The figure that had been watching them had to be connected to whatever was going on. Jack had seen this kind of thing before, whispers of trouble, the kind that followed bikers like a dark cloud. But this was something new, something more dangerous. He glanced at his brothers, the men who had ridden with him through thick and thin. They were focused, their eyes sharp, scanning the road ahead. But Jack could see the unease in their faces. They all felt it. Something was coming. The girl's brother, Jamal, wasn't just missing. He was in danger. And the person who had taken him wasn't going to let him go without a fight. As they neared the ridge, Jack's radio crackled to life. "This is Phantom." The voice came through, calm but urgent. "We've got movement. Up ahead. 2 vehicles heading our way." Jack's heart skipped a beat. 2 vehicles? That couldn't be good. "Everyone, stay sharp," he ordered, his voice cutting through the noise of the engines. "We don't know who we're up against." They reached the top of the hill, the headlights of their bikes slicing through the darkness. Jack slowed his bike, signaling for the others to do the same. The sound of the engines died down, and for a moment, the only sound was the wind rustling through the trees. Jack's eyes scanned the area ahead. In the distance, he could see the outline of a house, the faint glow of a porch light shining through the trees. It was too quiet. Too still. Stay in formation, Jack muttered, more to himself than to anyone else. He didn't like how this felt. But there was no turning back now. They were already in it. Jack led the group toward the house, his boots crunching on the gravel as he dismounted. The others followed, their movements precise, the years of experience showing in the way they moved. Every man knew his role, and they had all trained for moments like this. The girl, Aisha, remained by Jack's side, her small hand gripping his sleeve as they approached the house. "It's not much," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "But it's where they took him." Jack nodded, trying to keep his face calm. Inside, there was a sense of urgency. The house was old, the windows dark, and the air felt heavy with something Jack couldn't quite place. He motioned for Phantom and Storm to check the perimeter, while the rest of the group prepared for whatever came next. Jack's heart pounded in his chest. He had no idea what they were walking into, but he knew one thing for sure. Whatever it was, they were going to face it together. The door to the house creaked open, and Jack stepped inside. The scent of stale air and old wood filled his nostrils. He scanned the room quickly, his eyes darting over the broken furniture, the overturned chairs, the dust that covered everything like a blanket. And then he saw it. A bloodstain on the floor. The sight of it sent a chill down his spine. "He's here," Jack whispered to himself. But where was Jamal? And more importantly, who had brought him here? "Hey!" Sudden noise from the back of the house snapped Jack's attention to the hallway. His instincts kicked in, and he moved quickly, signaling the others to follow. They didn't have much time. As Jack reached the door at the end of the hall, he felt the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. Someone was watching them. Someone was waiting for them. Jack's hand tightened on the handle of the door. He pushed it open, the creak of the wood echoing in the silent house. Inside, Jamal was sitting on the floor, his eyes wide with fear, his hands tied to the chair. But it wasn't just him. There was someone else in the room. The figure was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark jacket that seemed to blend into the shadows. And he was holding something. Jack's eyes locked onto the object in the man's hand. "A gun." "Let him go," Jack said, his voice low and steady, but there was a fire burning behind his words. The man didn't move. Instead, he smiled, a cruel, knowing smile that made Jack's blood run cold. "You're too late," the man said, his voice rough and mocking. "This is just the beginning." Jack's eyes narrowed. This was no ordinary kidnapping. This was a message. And Jack wasn't going to let them get away with it. "I can feel the tension in the air." The man standing in front of Jack, his hands still gripping the gun, seemed to grow taller in the dim light of the house. His smile didn't falter as he looked at the bikers who had now surrounded the room. Jack's eyes locked on Jamal, the boy still tied to the chair. He could see the fear in his eyes, but there was something else, something stronger, a sense of hope that the bikers had arrived in time. Jack wasn't sure how long they had, but he knew they couldn't afford to waste another second. "Let him go," Jack repeated, his voice growing firmer, the weight of authority in his tone. But the man only chuckled, his voice low and mocking. "You think you can walk in here and tell me what to do? This isn't your fight, old man." Jack's heart was pounding in his chest, but he kept his cool. He could feel his brothers tightening their grip on their bikes and leather jackets. This was no longer just about the kid. This was personal. "This is our fight now," Jack said coldly, taking a step forward. "We don't walk away from family." The man's smile faltered for just a moment, and that was all Jack needed. In a flash, he lunged forward, faster than anyone could have expected. The room exploded with action as the bikers sprang into motion. Two of Jack's brothers, Phantom and Storm, darted toward the man, but he wasn't unprepared. The man's hand moved quickly, aiming the gun toward Phantom. "Back off," the man warned, his voice shaking slightly. But Phantom wasn't backing off. With a swift motion, he knocked the gun from the man's hand, sending it skidding across the floor. The man, now defenseless, scrambled back toward the corner, his eyes wild with fear. "You don't know who you're dealing with," the man growled, but Jack wasn't listening anymore. His focus was entirely on Jamal. He quickly moved to the boy, cutting the ropes that bound him to the chair. The moment Jamal was free, he threw his arms around Jack. "Thank you," Jamal whispered, his voice hoarse, his small body shaking with the aftershocks of fear. Jack gave the boy a quick nod, his eyes never leaving the man who was now cowering in the corner. Jack stood, his face a mask of calm anger. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice cold. The man hesitated, his breath ragged. Patrick Donovan, he muttered. Jack's eyes narrowed. The name sounded familiar, but it didn't click right away. Jack turned to his brothers. Anyone know this name? He asked. The bikers exchanged glances, but no one spoke. Then, it hit Jack like a freight train. Donovan, this wasn't just any man. This was the stepfather of the girl, Maya, the same man who had taken her to the hospital, the one who had somehow been hiding behind a respectable facade, the same man who was about to pay for his crimes. Jack's jaw clenched. You're a cop, he said slowly. That's why you thought you could get away with this, didn't you? You thought you had the law on your side. Patrick Donovan's eyes flared with rage. You don't know anything, he spat. You think you're some kind of hero? You're just a bunch of thugs on motorcycles, and you'll never understand the real world. Jack took a step forward, and the others did the same. You don't understand anything, Jack growled. You've been hiding behind a badge, abusing your power, and thinking you can hurt people with no consequences. Well, that ends now. Just as Jack moved toward Donovan, the door behind them creaked open. Jack whipped around, his hand instinctively reaching for the knife on his belt. But it wasn't a threat, just another one of his brothers, Crow, who had been keeping watch outside. The cops are on their way, she said, her voice low. We've got about 10 minutes before they arrive. Jack's mind raced. The law was closing in, and they had to act fast. Get out of here, Jack said to Donovan, his voice dangerously calm. You can leave on your own, or we can make sure you never come back. Your choice. Donovan's face turned pale as he looked around the room, realizing he was surrounded by men who had no intention of letting him walk away unscathed. He stumbled to his feet, his eyes darting around the room, then back to Jack. But instead of taking the easy way out, Donovan lunged forward, trying to make a run for it. It was a mistake. A big one. Before he could make it to the door, Phantom grabbed him by the collar, lifting him off the ground. You're not going anywhere, Phantom said, his voice menacing. The other bikers closed in, blocking all exits. Jack looked at Donovan, his eyes burning with fury. This is your last chance. You either face the consequences now, or you'll regret it for the rest of your life. As the man struggled in Phantom's grip, Jack knew they had to act fast. The police were coming, and there was no time left to waste. His thoughts turned to Maya and the others they had left behind. The real battle was only just beginning. I had to act quickly. The tension in the room was palpable, and as Donovan struggled in Phantom's grip, it was clear that he wasn't going to make this easy. His wild eyes darted around, looking for an escape route, but there was none. The bikers had the house surrounded. There were no more chances for him to run. He was trapped. You're making a big mistake, Donovan spat, his voice laced with venom. You don't know who you're messing with. Jack stepped closer, his boots thudding on the floor as he moved, his face a picture of cold fury. We know exactly who we're messing with, Jack said, his voice low but firm. You're a coward hiding behind a badge. But we're not here for you, not anymore. We're here for Maya, and we're here to make sure you never hurt anyone again. Donovan's expression shifted, a flicker of fear crossing his face. Jack saw it. He knew he had him. The man had been using his position for years, and now it was all unraveling. As Donovan tried to squirm free, Jack's hand shot out, grabbing the man by the collar. You're done. This ends tonight, Jack said. You're not getting away. Phantom held him steady, and the rest of the bikers moved in, standing guard, making sure there were no surprises. But Jack wasn't done. Not yet. He wasn't going to let this man walk away after everything he'd done. Jack's eyes flicked toward the door. Phantom, he said quietly. Get him to the front yard. We'll let the cops take it from here. Phantom nodded and shoved Donovan toward the door. As they stepped outside, Jack followed, his hand still resting on his knife, ready for anything. The air was cool now, the tension from the house still hanging in the air. The sound of engines could be heard in the distance, the rumble of police cars drawing nearer. Jack took a deep breath and turned to the rest of the crew. We did what we came here to do, Jack said. Now it's up to the law. But just as Jack was about to move toward his bike, a voice called out from the darkness. It was a familiar voice. Jack! Jack froze. He turned slowly, his gaze falling on the woman standing at the edge of the driveway. It was Elena Vargas, the social worker who had called him in the first place. She looked pale, her face lined with worry, but there was something else there too, relief. Maya's been asking for you, Elena said, her voice soft but urgent. Jack's heart skipped a beat. Maya. He'd promised her father he would protect her, and now here she was, waiting for him. Jack's eyes softened. Let's go get her, he said, his voice steady. They moved quickly, all of them, to the front door. Inside, Maya was sitting on the couch, her small body curled into a ball, her face hidden in her hands. When she heard the door open, she looked up, her wide brown eyes meeting Jack's. For a moment, the world seemed to pause. Maya's eyes were filled with so many emotions, fear, confusion, but most of all, relief. She knew she was safe. Jack walked toward her, his voice gentle as he spoke. It's all over now, he said. You're safe, Maya. Maya didn't speak at first. She just stared at him, her tears flowing freely now, the weight of everything she'd been through finally breaking through. Slowly, she stood, her small frame trembling as she walked toward him. And then, in the silence of that moment, she wrapped her arms around him, holding on tight. Jack knelt down, his arms going around her. He could feel the weight of the world on her shoulders, but in that moment, he knew it was finally over. She was safe. But outside, the sound of sirens was getting louder. The cops were close, and they were coming for Donovan. Jack didn't know what the future held for him or for Maya, but he knew this was a start. They were going to be all right. As the door opened again, the first of the police officers walked in, their uniforms stark against the dim lighting. Jack stepped back, nodding to Elena, signaling her to take over. The police would handle the rest. As he moved toward the door, he looked back at Maya one last time. She was still standing there, watching him, her eyes full of gratitude and something more, a quiet promise. Jack gave her a reassuring nod before stepping outside into the cool night air. The job wasn't done yet, but at least this chapter was closed. As the police took Donovan away, Jack could feel a sense of finality. The bad guys had lost, and the good guys had won. He wasn't sure where the road would lead next, but for the first time in a long while, he felt like he could breathe again. The Thunderwolves had done their job, and now, they could ride off into the night, knowing they'd made a difference. I sat on my bike, my hands gripping the handlebars tightly, but my mind was somewhere else. The sound of sirens still echoed in the distance, the police taking Donovan away. But the real battle was over. Maya was safe, and that was what mattered. I could see the faint glow of the hospital lights in the distance, and I couldn't help but think back to the promise I'd made years ago to Tyrone. It felt like a lifetime ago, but the weight of that promise had never left me. The girl was like family, and no matter what, I was always going to protect her. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the night finally starting to lift, but there was no peace in my heart. Not yet. I could still hear Maya's voice, the desperation in her tone as she begged me to help. Her small, fragile body trembling in fear. The fear of losing everything. She had already lost so much, her father, her home, her innocence, and she was only a child. But tonight, she'd found a new kind of family. One she could rely on. One that would never leave her. I looked over at my brothers, the ones who had stood by me through thick and thin. They weren't just bikers. They were more than that. They were my family. And family always stuck together, no matter what. We'd made it this far. But what was next? The road ahead was uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. We were ready for whatever came next. The world might have been a dark place, but we weren't going to let it swallow us whole. We'd fought for Maya, and we would keep fighting, no matter what. You good, boss? Phantom's voice broke through my thoughts. I looked over at him, giving him a nod. Yeah, I said, my voice steady, but my mind still racing. Just thinking. You did what needed to be done, he said, his face solemn, but there was respect in his eyes. She's safe now. I gave him a small smile, but the reality of the situation was hard to ignore. It's not over yet. The truth was, the job wasn't done. Donovan might be gone, but there were others out there, others who would do whatever it took to hurt people like Maya. And they would come for us, too. We weren't done fighting. We would keep riding, keep pushing forward, no matter the cost. As the others gathered around, I felt the weight of their loyalty. They were ready too. Ready to face whatever came next. We didn't know where the road would take us, but we were prepared to go all the way. As we rode out of the parking lot, leaving the hospital behind us, I could feel the adrenaline still pumping through my veins. The night was far from over, but we had a mission to complete, and we were going to finish it, no matter what. We rode through the streets, the engines of our bikes roaring in unison. The sound was deafening, but it felt good. Powerful. We were a force, a brotherhood. And we weren't going to let anyone stand in our way. The city lights flashed by as we took the long route home, my mind still replaying the events of the night. Maya's face, tear-streaked and full of fear, had been burned into my memory. But now she was safe. And that was all that mattered. We didn't stop until we reached the edge of town. The roads were dark, the night air cool against our skin. We all knew what had to be done, but none of us spoke. There was no need. Our bond was silent, understood. We were all in this together. When we reached the clearing, I finally spoke, my voice cutting through the silence. It's not over. There's still work to do. The others nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They knew what I meant. There were still enemies out there, and they weren't going to stop. But neither were we. We were a family, and we were going to keep fighting, no matter what. I could feel the weight of the night pressing down on me as we rode out of town. The road stretched endlessly ahead, winding through the quiet hills that surrounded us. The engines of our bikes were the only sound breaking the stillness of the night, and even that felt distant, like a low rumble far off in the horizon. My mind was still reeling from everything that had happened. Donovan was gone, Maya was safe, but the reality of the world we lived in hadn't changed. The law might have taken one man, but there were plenty more who would step into his place. And they wouldn't hesitate to hurt people again. People like Maya. We weren't done yet. I could feel the tension building again, the fight that was far from over. The world outside the club, outside of our family, was still broken. People like us, people who had been left behind, could only rely on each other to survive. That's why we kept riding. That's why we fought. The road ahead was still uncertain, but we had a mission now, a new purpose. As we rode through the countryside, the moon high above, I could sense the shift. The rest of the bikers, my brothers, were focused, determined. But there was a heaviness to their faces now. The calm before the storm was over. As we turned onto a new road, the headlights flickering in the dark, I knew that the real battle hadn't even begun. We hadn't just beaten one man. There were forces out there that were much bigger, and we were going to have to face them all. I thought about Maya again, her small body trembling as she hugged me back at the hospital. She had been through so much pain for someone so young. Her world had been turned upside down, and she had no one left to trust but us. And that's exactly why we couldn't stop. No matter what, we couldn't turn our backs on her. No matter what it took, we had to protect her. The other bikers knew it too. They had seen the way Maya looked at me, the way she clung to the hope that we would keep her safe. We were her family now, and we weren't going to let anyone take her away. Not now, not ever. The engines of our bikes roared again as we sped down the road, the wind cutting through the air, the night stretching out before us. We had no plan, no idea what we were walking into, but we were ready for whatever came next. The fight wasn't just about protecting Maya anymore. It was about something bigger. It was about standing up against the broken system that had failed her and so many others. It was about showing the world that people like us, people who had nothing, could still make a difference. I glanced over at Phantom, who was riding beside me, his eyes focused on the road. He gave me a quick nod, a silent affirmation that he knew what we had to do. We all knew, and that's what made us dangerous. We weren't just a group of bikers. We were a force, a family that wouldn't back down. We were the ones who had been forgotten, but we would make sure the world would remember us. We didn't need anyone's permission. We were going to fight for what was right. The road ahead seemed to go on forever, but I knew we couldn't stop until we finished what we'd started. We weren't just saving Maya anymore. We were saving ourselves, too. As the night stretched on, I knew there was still more to come, more to face. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. We would face it all together, and we would keep riding, no matter what. The world may be broken, but we were the ones who would fix it. And that was a promise. I could feel the tension in the air as we kept riding through the night, the headlights of our bikes cutting through the thick darkness like a beacon. The mission was far from over. Every mile that passed felt heavier, each turn on the road leading us deeper into unknown territory. I glanced at my brothers, their faces hard, focused. We all knew that something big was coming. We were getting closer to something, and whatever it was, we needed to be ready. Maya was safe, but there were still so many unanswered questions, so many dangers lurking in the shadows. The police had taken care of Donovan, but he was only one part of the puzzle. There was a bigger game being played here, and we were right in the middle of it. We weren't just fighting for Maya anymore. We were fighting for justice. We were fighting to tear down a system that protected people like Donovan and allowed them to hurt others without consequence. And we weren't going to stop until it was all exposed. The road ahead was long, but we couldn't turn back now. As we approached the small town, the quiet was almost suffocating. It was like we had crossed some invisible line, leaving behind the noise and chaos of the city. But the silence didn't comfort me. It only made the weight of our mission feel heavier. I could feel my heart beating faster with every mile, my mind racing with what was to come. What if we were walking right into another trap? What if the enemies we were, after had already anticipated our every move? I didn't know, but I did know this. We had to take the risk. We had to face whatever came next. We couldn't let fear stop us. Maya's voice echoed in my mind. Thank you for saving me. I knew we had to finish what we started. We couldn't let anyone, especially her, suffer because we were afraid to act. The others must have sensed it too. No one spoke, but there was a quiet understanding between us. We were all in this together, and that's what made us strong. As we rolled into the heart of the town, the engines of our bikes still growling in the distance, we could see the lights of the local diner up ahead. It looked like any other small-town diner. But I knew better. This wasn't just about a cup of coffee. This was where everything would change. The diner was just a front, a place to gather, to plan. And we weren't just there for food. We were there to make sure the people who had been exploiting the system would finally see the consequences of their actions. As we parked our bikes outside, I could see a few locals glancing over at us. They probably thought we were just a bunch of troublemakers passing through. They didn't know what we were really here for. Inside, the diner was quiet. Too quiet. The air was thick with the tension of secrets waiting to be revealed. Jack walked in first, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. The rest of us followed, our eyes scanning the room. A few people sat at the counter, nursing cups of coffee, their eyes darting between us and the door. But we weren't interested in them. We were interested in the man sitting in the far corner, hunched over a cup, his face hidden in shadow. He looked like just another trucker passing through, but I knew better. This was the man we had been tracking. This was the man who was about to lead us to the truth. I could feel the weight of the moment, the weight of everything we had fought for up until now. This was it. The man looked up as we approached, his eyes narrowing as he took in our leather jackets and our serious faces. "You've been looking for me," he said, his voice low and rough. "I guess it's time we had a little talk." The air in the diner shifted. People shifted in their seats, a few standing up and heading for the door. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. "We don't have time for games," Jack said, his voice calm, but carrying the authority of someone who knew what was at stake. "You're going to tell us everything, and you're going to do it now." The man's face twisted into a smirk, but I could see the fear behind it. He knew what we were capable of, and he knew we weren't going to leave until we had answers. As he started to speak, I felt the hair on the back of my neck stand up. This wasn't just a conversation. This was the beginning of something much bigger. And as the man started to unravel the truth, I realized we were about to step into a war that none of us were prepared for. But we would face it together, and we would win. I could feel the weight of the moment as the man sat across from us, his hands trembling slightly as he stared down at his coffee cup. The truth was spilling from him, piece by piece, and with each word, I could feel the walls closing in on the dark world we were stepping into. This wasn't just about Donovan anymore. It wasn't even just about Maya. This was bigger than all of us. The man's name was Carl Thompson, and he was connected to the underground network we'd been tracking. He had been working for one of the largest crime syndicates in the state, helping to funnel money and power to the people at the top. And what he had to say was more damning than I could have ever imagined. "You've been chasing shadows," Carl said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The real power, the real players, they're not even in town anymore. They've moved operations. What you've been dealing with, it's nothing compared to what's coming." His words sent a chill down my spine. I had known this was only part of the story, but hearing it from him made it all too real. Carl was in too deep, and the people behind him were ruthless. He didn't just owe them money, he owed them his life. "Who are they?" Jack's voice cut through the tension. "You're talking in circles. Tell us who's behind this." Carl hesitated, his eyes darting nervously around the room. He was a man who had spent too much time running, too much time hiding. He knew what we were capable of, and he was afraid. Finally, he looked back at us, his face pale. It's not just one group. There's a network, a web that spans across cities. And the man you're really looking for, his name is Victor Russo. He's the one running the show now. The name hit me like a ton of bricks. Victor Russo was a name I had heard whispered in dark corners before, but I never imagined he'd be the one behind all this. He was a legend in the world of organized crime, known for his ability to manipulate and control everything from behind the scenes. And now, he had his sights set on us. Russo, Jack muttered, his jaw tightening. Why now? Why is he coming after us? Carl swallowed hard, his hands shaking as he answered. He's been watching. He's been making sure everything goes according to plan. But now that you've interfered, he's ready to make his move. You've become a threat. The pieces were starting to fall into place. Everything that had happened, the attacks, the threats, the manipulation, had all been part of his game. He had been waiting for the right moment to pull the strings and set everything into motion. And now that moment had come. What do we do now? I asked, my voice steady despite the rising storm inside me. Carl looked up at us, his eyes filled with fear and resignation. You need to move fast. Get out of here. Russo won't stop until he's gotten what he wants. He'll make sure you don't survive this. Jack stood up, his face a mask of determination. We don't run from anything, he said, his voice low but firm. We face this head on. We all stood up, the weight of the decision settling over us. We had no choice now. We had to go after Russo. We had to stop him before he could do any more damage. As we left the diner, the wind whipping against our faces, I could feel the urgency in every step we took. The game had changed. We were no longer just protecting Maya. We were going after the heart of the enemy, and we wouldn't stop until we took it down. The night was growing colder, but it wasn't the chill of the air that had me on edge. It was the feeling of being hunted. We were walking into the lion's den, but there was no turning back now. We were ready. We had to be. The road ahead was going to be long, and we had no idea how many enemies we would face. But one thing was certain. If Victor Russo thought he could control us, he was about to learn just how wrong he was. We weren't just bikers. We were a family, and no one messed with our family. We knew that taking down Russo wasn't going to be easy, but we weren't about to back down. The road ahead had never seemed more dangerous, yet we kept pushing forward. The weight of the mission hung heavily on all of us. As we rode through the winding streets under the cover of night, each of us was deep in thought, but we knew this was more than just a fight for survival. This was about justice, redemption, and protecting those who couldn't protect themselves. We weren't just a group of bikers anymore. We were a force. We were family, and we would fight for each other no matter the cost. The night air was sharp, biting at our skin as the engines of our bikes roared down the empty roads. The further we went, the more determined I became. Every mile was a step closer to confronting Russo, but also to understanding the full extent of the darkness we were about to enter. We knew little about him, but what we did know was enough to make us realize that he wasn't just some low-level criminal. He was the head of a criminal empire, someone who had been pulling strings for years, quietly weaving a web of power that affected everyone around him. And now, we were right in the middle of it. The cold wind cut through my jacket as we made our way through the city, the lights flickering as we neared the warehouse district. I could feel the tension building, a sense of urgency in every turn. As we pulled up to an abandoned building, I could sense that we were getting closer to what we were after. The building stood tall and imposing, its broken windows staring out into the darkness like empty eyes. We dismounted, each of us moving with purpose, our senses heightened. I looked over at Jack, and he gave me a subtle nod, confirming what we all knew. This was the place. We weren't sure if Russo would be here, but this was where we had to start. The door creaked open, and we stepped inside, the darkness swallowing us whole. The air smelled of dust and decay, and I could feel my muscles tensing, ready for whatever might come next. My thoughts flickered back to Maya and what she had been through. She had no idea what we were walking into, and I wasn't sure if I could protect her from everything that lay ahead. But we had to do this. For her. For the family. Stay sharp, Jack muttered under his breath. His voice was steady, but I could hear the edge of determination in it. We moved deeper into the building, the sound of our footsteps echoing off the walls. The silence was deafening. Then, a faint sound broke through, the scrape of metal against concrete. I turned, but it was too late. A group of men stepped out from the shadows, their faces hidden behind masks. They moved quickly, surrounding us. "You should have stayed out of this," one of them said, his voice low, threatening. I could feel the heat rising in my chest. We were surrounded, but we weren't afraid. These men were nothing compared to what we had already faced. "We're not leaving without Russo," Jack said firmly, stepping forward. The man smirked. "You think you can just walk in here and take him? This is our territory." I could feel the tension in the air as the standoff continued. We weren't going to fight unless we had to, but I knew that wasn't going to stop these guys from trying. They moved in closer, their eyes cold and calculating. "Last chance," Jack said, his voice low and unwavering. "We're not leaving without him." The air crackled with anticipation. I could feel the weight of the situation bearing down on us. They were giving us one last warning, but we weren't backing down. The silence stretched out, and then it happened. One of the men lunged at Jack, and everything erupted into chaos. A fight broke out, the sound of fists connecting with bodies, the crash of metal against the concrete floor. I was caught up in the action, fists flying as I fought to protect my brothers and keep them safe. There was no time to think, no time to hesitate. We had to fight. We had no choice. The men were strong, but we were faster, more determined. Each blow felt like a message to Russo and anyone else who stood in our way. This was our family, and no one was going to hurt us again. As the last of the attackers hit the ground, I took a deep breath, wiping the sweat from my brow. We were bruised, battered, but we weren't done yet. We still had a mission to complete. We still had to find Russo. Jack looked over at me, his face grim but resolute. "Let's move," he said. And we did. We pushed forward, deeper into the heart of the building, ready for whatever lay ahead. We were so close now. We could feel it. The final confrontation was coming, and we were going to face it head-on. There was no turning back. The building was eerily quiet now, but I could feel the adrenaline still rushing through my veins. We had taken down the goons Russo sent to slow us down, but I knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead. As we moved deeper into the warehouse, the tension between us was palpable. Every biker, every man here, knew that we were stepping into the lion's den. This wasn't just a raid, it was the final confrontation. The sounds of our footsteps echoed off the concrete walls, and I could feel my heartbeat in my chest, each beat reminding me that there was no turning back. This time, we had to end it. We reached a door at the end of the hall. It was heavy, reinforced with metal, and there were no signs of life on the other side. I exchanged a quick glance with Jack. We didn't need to speak, we knew what was coming. Jack raised his hand, signaling for everyone to stop. He motioned for Phantom and Storm to take positions on either side of the door. They moved like shadows, their movements quick and quiet. I could feel the weight of the moment in the pit of my stomach. We were so close now. We had come too far to be stopped by anything. I could hear the sound of voices coming from the other side of the door, low and hushed. This was it, the moment we had been preparing for. I nodded to Jack, who stepped forward and kicked the door open with one swift motion. It crashed against the wall, the sound loud and jarring in the stillness of the warehouse. For a split second, everything went quiet, and then it exploded. The room was dimly lit, but I could make out the figure standing at the far end of the space. It was him, Victor Russo, the man we had been hunting for so long. He was tall, broad-shouldered, his face hardened with years of violence and control. But even in the dim light, I could see something in his eyes. It wasn't fear. It was something colder, calculation. "So, you've finally come for me," Russo said, his voice smooth, like he had been expecting us. "I've been waiting for this moment. But you're too late." I stepped forward, the words coming out before I could stop them. "It's over, Russo. You're done." Russo smiled, a cold, cruel smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "You think you've won?" he said, his gaze shifting to the shadows behind him. "You're only just beginning to understand how deep this goes." The air in the room thickened as two more men stepped out from the shadows. They were armed, their expressions hard. These weren't just muscle, these were his inner circle. I could tell right away that they were more than just hired hands. They were loyal to Russo, ready to die for him. I could feel the tension building again, the weight of the moment settling in. But I wasn't going to back down. Neither was Jack. Neither were any of us. "You can try to fight," Jack said, his voice unwavering. "But we've got the law on our side now. You can't hide forever." Russo's smile faded slightly, but the edge of his arrogance never left. The law? You think they'll be able to stop me? You think they can take down what I've built? You're fools. I stepped closer, my fists clenched. The only fool here is you, I said. You've been playing games for too long. But it ends now. You've hurt enough people. Russo didn't flinch. Instead, he turned, slowly, and nodded to his men. They raised their guns, and for a moment, I thought we were done. But we weren't. I heard the click of a trigger, and before I could react, the gunfire rang out. The world seemed to move in slow motion. The sound of the bullets was deafening, but it wasn't us who were hit. The two men who had stepped forward crumpled to the floor, their bodies lifeless. Behind us, a familiar figure stepped out from the shadows. It was Elena. She had been watching, waiting for the right moment. She wasn't just a social worker. She was more connected than we had ever realized. And now, she was the one who had just saved us. You've got to be kidding me, Russo muttered, his face twisted in disbelief. You were working with them. Elena didn't answer. Instead, she walked forward, her eyes locked on Russo's. You're finished, she said, her voice cold and calm. You've been running this for far too long, but it's over. You can't escape what's coming. Russo's expression shifted then, a flash of panic crossing his face. He looked around, as if searching for some escape, but there was no way out. The bikers had surrounded the room, and the only exit was blocked. He was trapped. It's over, Russo, I said again, stepping closer. You're not walking away from this. Russo's eyes darted to the door, but there was nowhere to run. He was done, and we had won. I could feel the weight of the moment, the heavy satisfaction of knowing that, finally, justice would be served. For Maya, for everyone he had hurt. The fight was over, and we had won. The air in the warehouse felt heavy, the adrenaline still pumping through my veins as we watched Russo crumble under the weight of his own defeat. His once confident demeanor was gone, replaced with a look of sheer terror as he realized there was nowhere left for him to run. The room was silent for a moment, the only sound being the distant hum of our bikes outside. We had done it. We had finally cornered the man who had been pulling the strings, the mastermind behind the suffering of so many innocent people. But there was still one last thing we had to do. We couldn't let him walk away, not after everything he had done, not after the lives he had ruined. Elena stood beside us, her presence more powerful than ever. She had been working with us from the beginning, guiding us, giving us the information we needed to bring Russo down. And now, as we faced him in this final confrontation, it was clear that her role had been far more significant than we had realized. It's over, Russo, Jack said, his voice cold, his eyes locked on the man who had thought he was untouchable. Russo didn't respond at first. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped, his hands trembling at his sides. He had no escape. His empire was collapsing, and he knew it. You're nothing, Russo spat, trying to regain some of his former arrogance. You think this is going to change anything? I've built this from the ground up. I've controlled everything. No one will stop what's coming. Jack stepped forward, his presence commanding. You're done, he said simply. This ends now. There's no one left who will protect you. You've made too many enemies. The silence in the room was thick, oppressive. Russo looked around, his eyes darting to the exits, but he knew it was pointless. His men were either dead or in custody, and there was no way out for him. I could feel the weight of the moment settling over me. It wasn't just about taking down one man. This was bigger than that. This was about exposing the truth, about holding those who had been hiding in the shadows accountable for their actions. Russo wasn't just some petty criminal. He was a symbol of everything that was wrong with the system, everything that needed to be brought to light. And we had done it. We're not going to kill you, Jack said, his voice steady. But you're going to rot in prison for the rest of your life. Everything you've done, everything you've built, it's all over. Russo let out a bitter laugh, shaking his head. You think the law will stop me? You think you've won? You don't know anything. Jack didn't flinch. We know enough, he replied. We know you're finished. And we know that no matter how hard you try, there's no coming back from this. The door to the warehouse creaked open, and the sound of sirens grew louder as the police finally arrived. Elena had contacted them earlier, making sure the right people were in place to take Russo into custody. As the officers stormed in, Russo was quickly handcuffed and led away. The sound of his protests echoed through the building, but none of us cared. He had lost. The rest of us stood in silence for a moment, watching as the officers took Russo away. It was over, but it didn't feel like a victory. It felt like the end of a chapter, the beginning of a new fight. There was still so much more to do. As we stood there, the weight of everything that had happened seemed to settle in. We had exposed the truth, but there were still others out there, other people like Russo who would do anything to maintain control. And we weren't done yet. We couldn't stop now. Not when there was so much left to fight for. We did it, Phantom said quietly, breaking the silence. But there was no celebration, no high fives. We were still processing everything, still feeling the weight of what we had just accomplished. Jack looked around at the group, his face grim but resolute. We've still got work to do, he said. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. We all nodded, our resolve hardening. The battle had been won, but the war wasn't over. And as we walked out of the warehouse, the sound of the police cars fading into the distance, we knew that we would keep fighting. For Maya, for the people who couldn't fight for themselves, for our family, and for a world that needed to change. The road ahead was long, but we were ready. We would never stop, not until every last piece of this broken system was torn down and rebuilt. Together, we were unstoppable. The aftermath of Russo's capture lingered in the air like smoke from a fire that had yet to be fully extinguished. As we rode out of the warehouse district, the world felt different, but not in a way that brought peace. There was a heavy silence between us, the weight of the night's events sitting with us. Small diner just outside town, the soft hum of the engines died, replaced by the distant sound of crickets in the night. The diner was quiet, just the way we liked it. We dismounted, the click of our boots the only sound in the still night air. The familiar smell of coffee and grease filled the air as we walked inside, the fluorescent lights flickering above. Maya wasn't there yet, but we had sent word for her to meet us. I couldn't stop thinking about her, about the look in her eyes when she had finally realized that we had done what we set out to do. She was safe, but what did that really mean in the grand scheme of things? We had taken down one part of the problem, but there were still so many others, hidden in the shadows, waiting for their turn to strike. I sat down at a booth, my fingers tracing the rim of my coffee cup as I tried to clear my mind. Jack, as always, was the first to break the silence. We've won this round, but we both know the fight's far from over, he said, his voice steady, but heavy with the understanding of what was coming. You're right, I said, my voice quiet, the weight of the truth settling over me. But we can't stop. Not now. Not after everything. I looked around at my brothers, all of them sitting around the table. Phantom, Storm, and the rest of the crew, their faces a mix of exhaustion and resolve. They understood. They had fought alongside me every step of the way, and they knew that the war we had started wasn't over. There's more, Phantom said, his voice soft but serious. Russo was just a small piece of a much bigger puzzle. We've exposed some of it, but we haven't even scratched the surface. He was right. Russo wasn't the only one out there. The people behind him, the ones who had helped him rise to power, were still out there, and they weren't going to stop because one man had fallen. What now? Storm asked, leaning forward, his eyes burning with determination. Now, I said, standing up and looking at my brothers, we take this fight to them. We don't wait for them to come after us. We go after them first. It's time to end this once. And for all. The diner door opened, and Maya stepped inside. She looked different, more confident, more at peace. She had been through hell, but she was standing tall, and that was all that mattered now. She walked over to our table, her eyes meeting mine. Is it really over? She asked, her voice quiet, but full of hope. I looked at her, my heart heavy but resolute. It's not over, I said, my voice steady. But we've taken the first step, and we're not stopping until we finish this. Maya nodded, understanding more than words could express. She had seen enough to know that this fight wasn't just about one person, one city. It was about changing the system that allowed people like Russo to thrive. We all knew it. The fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. We do this together, Jack said, his voice firm, his eyes meeting each of ours. We stick to our word. We protect those who can't protect themselves. We all nodded in agreement, the weight of the decision settling over us. It wasn't just about fighting for justice anymore. It was about ensuring that people like Maya, people who had been hurt by the system, never had to face that darkness again. The war was just beginning, and we were ready for it. We walked out of the diner as a family, knowing that the road ahead was long and dangerous, but it was the road we had chosen, and we weren't afraid to walk it. Together. The morning sun was just beginning to rise as we sat outside the diner, the world slowly coming back to life after the chaos of the night. We had made it through, but the road ahead still loomed large. The dust was settling, but I could feel the weight of the future pressing on my shoulders. We had taken down one powerful man, but as we knew all too well, there were always more waiting in the wings, ready to take his place. We couldn't rest. Not yet. The team was still together, each of us holding the pieces of the puzzle we had yet to solve. But for the first time in a long while, there was hope in the air. The battle for Maya was over, but the war for justice had just begun. As the sun rose higher, I looked at my brothers and sisters in arms, each of us sharing a silent understanding. We had done what we set out to do, but it wasn't enough. Not until we had rooted out every ounce of corruption, every shadowed corner of the system that had allowed men like Russo to thrive. So what now? Storm's voice broke the silence, his face still bruised from the fight, but determined as ever. I could see the same questions in all of their eyes. What came next? We had taken our first step, but we all knew that nothing was ever truly finished. Now, we go after the rest of them, I said, my voice steady, but the weight of the responsibility clear in my tone. We keep pushing until they have nowhere left to hide. We don't stop until every last one of them is exposed. Jack, who had been silent until now, nodded slowly. We do this together, he said firmly. And we do it right. No shortcuts. No backing down. We all nodded in agreement. The fight wasn't over. It was never going to be just one victory. It was going to be a series of battles, each more difficult than the last. But we would keep fighting. We had no other choice. You really think we can take down the rest of them? Phantom asked, his voice low, but his eyes were filled with the same fire that burned in all of us. We've already come this far. There's no turning back now. I looked at him, and for a moment, I saw the doubt in his eyes. It wasn't about whether we were strong enough to win. It was about whether we could keep going, no matter the cost. I knew what he was asking. Could we survive this? Could we make it through to the other side? We will, I said, my voice unwavering. We're a family, and we protect our own, no matter what. Elena, who had been standing by quietly, spoke up. I'll be here, she said, her voice calm but firm. I won't let you go into this without help. I smiled at her, grateful for her presence, for everything she had done. She was more than just a social worker. She was part of this family now. She had proven herself time and time again, and I knew we could trust her to stand by our side. As the others filed out of the diner, heading for the bikes, I stood still for a moment, looking at the horizon. The sun was fully up now, and the light was different. The darkness of the night had given way to the harsh clarity of day. There were still so many obstacles ahead, but for the first time, I felt like we had a real chance. We weren't just fighting to survive anymore. We were fighting for something bigger than all of us. For the future. For the people who couldn't fight for themselves. And we were going to win. We had to. As I mounted my bike and looked at the others, I knew this was only the beginning. The war was still far from over, but we had the strength, the resolve, and the fire to see it through. Together, we would take on whatever came next. We were ready for it. Let's go, I said, and with that, we rode off into the distance, our engines roaring in unison as we left the past behind us and rode toward the future. It was time to finish what we had started, and nothing was going to stop us.